Hey everyone, and welcome to The Deep Dive. We're switching things up a bit today and diving into some material that you specifically requested. We're going to be taking a deep dive into Matt Abraham's book, Think Faster, Talk Smarter. Have you ever, totally blanked when you're put on the spot? You know, like you're suddenly supposed to speak in front of people?
Oh, yeah, definitely. It's something I think we've all experienced at some point.
We're tackling that today. The art of impromptu speaking. How to think faster and talk smarter when you're put on the spot.
It's funny how it's one of those skills we tend to avoid.
Totally.
But then it pops up constantly in our life.
Like everywhere.
Right.
Whether it's a casual chat or like a high-stakes presentation at work.
Exactly. Being able to think on your feet is invaluable.
Abrahams doesn't sugarcoat it at all in this book. He dives right into that feeling we all get. That this suck mess moment when you're asked to speak off the cuff.
I know exactly what you mean.
Palms are sweating. Mind's going blank.
Oh, yeah. The whole shebang.
You're like, oh no, this is happening.
It really can feel like a threat, like physically. Abrahams actually uses the term plumbing reversal to describe the symptoms of that fight or flight response.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Vivid, but it highlights how much our brains genuinely perceive impromptu speaking as a threat.
Totally. Like we think we're going to die or something.
Right.
So in the book, he shares this hilarious story about a job interview that he was in where he was asked, what would I find if I peeled back your first 3 layers like an onion?
Wow.
Like who prepares for that?
I wouldn't even know where to begin.
Exactly. And that's a perfect example of our brains just totally freeze up.
Yeah.
Because we're caught off guard and all we're trying to do is survive the moment.
Yeah.
So we can't access any creativity or thoughtful responses.
You're in survival mode.
Exactly. So the good news is that Abrahams really emphasizes this point, that impromptu speaking is a learned skill.
Okay. That makes me feel better already.
It's not some innate talent that some people just have and some people don't.
Right.
It's something we can actually train ourselves to get better at.
That is good news. It's fascinating how many of us limit our lives because of this, though. You know.
Yes, totally.
Like past speaking failures. Abrahams gives the example of Irma, the librarian who chose her career path specifically to avoid speaking publicly because of a bad experience she had in high school.
Oh, wow.
It's sad to think about how much potential we miss out on because we're so afraid of those situations.
Totally.
Like we box ourselves in.
Exactly. And that's where this deep dive comes in. And where Abraham's book really comes in. It's all about unlearning those limiting beliefs.
Okay.
And equipping ourselves with the tools to become more confident, better speakers. Moving from this sucks to, hey, I can do this.
I like that.
It's a total mindset shift.
Yeah, from dreading these situations to seeing them as opportunities, like for growth.
Yeah, for connection even.
Absolutely.
This is an opportunity to share my ideas with the world.
I love that. Abrahams actually lays out a 6-step method to help us do just that. He calls them calm, unlock, redefine, listen, structure, and focus.
Wow. That's a lot.
It is a lot to cover.
Yeah.
We may not get to all 6 steps today, but we're going to unpack some of the most impactful ones.
Okay, sounds good.
Starting with calm, because I think this is something we can all relate to.
Yes.
That feeling of anxiety, the nerves, the stress when we're put on the spot. This first step is crucial because it's about managing that anxiety.
Okay.
Not necessarily trying to eliminate it completely.
Right.
Because a little nervous energy can actually be beneficial.
Okay, interesting.
It's about harnessing it, using it to our advantage.
It's like that feeling right before you have to give a presentation, right?
Totally.
Like butterflies in your stomach.
Yeah.
Maybe that's actually your body giving you an extra boost.
Yeah, to perform better.
I never thought of it like that.
And Abrahams gives some really great tips for managing those nerves. One that I thought was really surprising, he actually suggests holding something cold in your hand.
What?
Yeah. Apparently, our core body temperature rises when we're stressed, and that contributes to things like sweating and blushing.
Cool.
So holding a cold bottle of water can actually counteract that physical response.
Wow, who knew?
It's such a simple thing.
Yeah.
But it's effective. Another tactic that he talks about is buying yourself time.
Okay, how do we do that?
By asking generic questions related to whatever the topic is.
Got it.
He gives an example from his own teaching experience. Sometimes he loses his train of thought while he's lecturing.
Oh, yeah, I bet that happens.
And what he does is he says something like, Before we move on, I'd like you to consider how this applies to your own lives.
Oh, that's smart.
And it gives him that moment to kind of regroup.
Yeah, to collect his thoughts.
But outwardly, he still appears calm and composed.
So you're not letting the audience know that you've lost your way.
Exactly. That's a good tip. It's a subtle way to redirect the focus.
Okay, so we've tackled calm. What about unlock? What's Abraham's getting at there?
So unlock is all about breaking free from those mental shortcuts that we all have.
Okay.
Are called heuristics. And they basically limit our creativity.
Does it hold us back?
They can. Because our brains love shortcuts, especially under pressure.
Okay.
We try to rely on things we already know, but that can lead to really predictable and dull responses.
I can see that.
He illustrates this with a fun little game called Shout the Wrong Name.
Okay, how do you play?
So you point to an object and then you shout out the first word that comes to mind.
Okay. Simple enough.
But what's interesting is that even in this seemingly random task, our brains still cling to patterns.
Okay.
Like we tend to shout out words that are semantically related to the object.
Even though the whole point is to be random.
Right. And those are our heuristics at work.
So it's about becoming aware of those like ingrained patterns.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then breaking free from them. Like think about how many emails you get that start with, I hope this email finds you well. Oh, so many. It's polite though.
It is, but it's a little predictable.
You're right. It is.
So recognizing those heuristics is the first step to unlocking more creative, authentic ways of communicating.
I'm ready to break free. So what about redefine? How do we redefine this suck us moments?
Well, this step is all about shifting our perspective on mistakes.
Okay.
Abrahams encourages us to not be afraid to make mistakes. In fact, he says, embrace mistakes.
Wow. That's a big one.
I know, right?
Especially when you're put on the spot. You just want to be perfect.
Yeah, but that pressure to be perfect is actually what holds us back.
Makes sense.
Reframing mistakes as learning opportunities can significantly reduce that pressure.
Okay.
The book actually mentions a software company that holds Failure Fridays,
That's awesome.
where employees get together and share their mistakes.
Oh.
But it's lighthearted.
Okay.
It's not meant to be like a shaming thing at all.
So they're normalizing failure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They see it as part of the learning process.
I love that idea. Taking the sting out of messing up. Totally. So it becomes less about, oh no, I made a mistake.
Right.
And more about, okay, what can I learn from this?
Yeah, how can I do better next time?
Right. And that shift in mindset can be incredibly liberating.
Definitely. It makes those impromptu speaking situations so much less daunting.
Exactly. Knowing it's okay to not be perfect.
I like that a lot.
And that openness to making mistakes is actually a really important part of the next step,
Oh, okay.
which is listen, which we'll dive into after a quick break.
All right, so we've talked about calming those nerves, unlocking our potential, and redefining our relationship with mistakes.
Huh.
What about listen? It seems kind of obvious,
Right.
but I'm guessing there's more to it than just, hearing words.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Listen is about truly tuning into what's being communicated,
Okay.
both verbally and non-verbally.
Right.
We can get so caught up in our own heads,
Totally.
with our anxieties and trying to come up with what we're going to say next,
Uh-huh.
that we miss really crucial information.
Yeah, it's like we're so busy thinking about what we're going to say that we forget to actually listen to what the other person is saying.
Exactly. And Abrahams actually shares a really great story about this. His friend, Fred Dust, was advising senior members of the Greek government.
Oh, wow.
This was during a financial crisis.
Okay.
And they were considering selling this really valuable piece of land.
Uh-huh.
But Dust could sense this unease in the room,
No.
even though no one was voicing concerns directly.
Oh, interesting.
So he decided to scrap his prepared remarks and just address that tension head on.
Wow.
It was a risk. But he trusted his intuition, and he spoke to what he felt the audience needed to hear,
I remember this story. It was such a good example of reading between the lines.
Totally.
Like, it's not always about what people are actually saying.
It's about what they're not saying.
Yeah.
And in this case, it really paid off for Dust. The prime minister approached him after the meeting
Wow.
and actually thanked him for articulating what they'd been feeling but hadn't been able to express.
Wow, that's the power of listening, right?
Totally.
And responding to those unspoken needs.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that sometimes the most impactful communication isn't about just delivering information.
Right.
It's about connecting with people on an emotional level.
Absolutely. And there's another really insightful example in the book about Adam Tobin, who's Abraham's improv mentor.
Okay.
Tobin was pitching a TV show to a studio executive.
Yeah.
And the executive asked him this bizarre question. He said, why isn't your show a sci-fi story?
That's so random.
Well, right? Totally out of left field.
I wouldn't know how to respond to that.
Yeah, it's definitely a curveball. But Tobin, instead of dismissing the question or getting defensive, he leaned in.
Okay.
And asked for clarification.
Smart.
And it turns out the executive was trying to preempt his boss's concerns about sci-fi shows because his last few ventures in that genre had flopped.
Ah, so he was trying to protect himself, basically.
Exactly. But by actively listening, Tobin uncovered this hidden concern.
And then he could address it.
Right. And use it to strengthen his pitch.
That is so brilliant, like turning a potential obstacle into an advantage.
Totally. It just shows how active listening can open up all these opportunities and help us navigate these tricky situations. It's about slowing down, taking a breath, and really tuning in.
Abraham's talked about the importance of slowing down in general.
Right.
Because we're bombarded with information all the time.
Constantly.
And it's so easy to get swept up in that frenetic energy.
Yeah.
But when we consciously slow down, we actually create space for deeper understanding.
He shares this great technique that journalist Deborah Schifrin uses.
Okay.
After she finishes asking her interview questions, she'll ask, "Is there anything important I haven't asked?"
Oh.
And then she waits.
Oh my gosh, that silence.
I know, right?
It must feel like forever.
But it's in that pause, that space, that the most insightful information comes out.
Because the person has time to think.
They're not just giving you the canned response.
Right.
They have time to reflect.
I like that a lot. It also signals to the other person that you're really present.
Exactly.
And that you value what they have to say.
So there are all these little techniques we can use to become better listeners. Things like maintaining eye contact, using nonverbal cues to show that we're engaged, asking clarifying questions, paraphrasing to make sure we understand.
Okay.
It's all about being more mindful and consciously choosing to be present in the conversation.
All right. So once we've truly listened and understood the context, what's next?
Then we can move on to structure.
Structure. Doesn't that seem a little counterintuitive to impromptu speaking?
It might.
Aren't we supposed to be like spontaneous and off the cuff?
Right. But Abrahams actually argues that structure is essential for effective impromptu communication.
Okay, interesting.
It's not about rigidly planning out every word you're going to say.
Okay.
But it's about having a framework.
To guide your thoughts.
Yes. To help you organize your message.
It's like telling a story that just rambles on and on.
Yeah.
With no clear beginning, middle, or end. The listener just gets lost.
Totally. And they tune out.
Yeah. A clear structure helps us avoid those rambling tangents and deliver a more concise, impactful message.
Exactly. And there are different structures we can use.
Like what?
Depending on the situation.
Yeah.
You've mentioned the what, so, what, now, what framework before.
Oh, yeah.
So imagine you're asked to give a quick presentation on a new project.
Okay.
You could start with what? Just a clear explanation of the project.
Okay.
Then you move to so what? Why is this important? What are the benefits?
Okay.
And then finally, now what? What are the next steps? What do we need to do?
It's so simple, but so effective.
Right.
It gives the listener a roadmap.
Exactly. A way to follow along.
So they don't get lost.
And it's so adaptable. Abrahams gives other structures as well, like the problem-solution-benefit framework.
Okay.
Which is really good for persuasive communication.
Like if you're trying to convince somebody of something.
Exactly. You start by clearly defining the problem. Then you present your solution.
Okay.
And then you highlight the benefits of that solution.
Gotcha. I'm already thinking about how I can apply these to my own life.
Me too.
Like it's a secret weapon for impromptu speaking.
It really is. And the more you practice using these frameworks, the more natural they become.
Okay, so we've covered calm, unlock, listen, and structure. What about focus? What's the big idea there?
Focus is about making sure that your message is clear, concise, and relevant to your audience. It's about cutting through all the noise and delivering a message that truly resonates. Abrahams breaks it down into 4 dimensions: goal, relevance, accessibility, and concision.
Let's unpack those. What's goal all about?
Goal is being crystal clear on what you want to achieve with your communication.
Okay.
What's the desired outcome? What action do you want your audience to take?
Okay, so you have to have an intention.
Yes. It's easy to get sidetracked when we're speaking off the cuff. But if you have that clear goal in mind, it helps keep you on track.
Okay.
And helps you deliver a more impactful message.
I like that.
And it's not just about conveying information. It's also about the emotional impact.
Okay.
Do you want to inspire your audience? Do you want to motivate them? Do you want to persuade them?
I love that you're bringing in that emotional piece.
It's so important.
It reminds us that communication is about connecting on a human level,
Absolutely.
not just rattling off facts and figures.
Okay, so now let's talk about relevance.
Okay.
Relevance is all about making sure your message resonates with your audience.
Got it.
Why should they care? How does this information connect to their needs or interests or concerns?
It's like putting yourself in their shoes,
Exactly.
trying to understand their perspective.
Yes.
What's in it for them? How can you make this information relevant to them?
Right. And there are different techniques you can use for this, like finding common ground, asking questions to understand their needs, using examples and anecdotes that will resonate with their experiences.
So you're tailoring your message to that specific audience. One size doesn't fit all.
Okay, now let's move on to accessibility.
Okay.
This one's all about making sure your message is clear and understandable,
Okay.
avoiding jargon, acronyms, or complex language.
So like speaking in plain English.
Pretty much. You
Yeah.
want to make sure your message is accessible to everyone,
Okay.
regardless of their background or expertise.
Makes sense. All right. And last but not least, concision. What's the key principle there?
Concision is all about getting to the point.
Okay.
It's about using the fewest words possible to get your message across clearly and effectively.
We live in a world of short attention spans, so
I know.
you got to be concise.
Exactly. Abrahams actually highlights the power of brevity with the example of Steve Jobs introducing the iPod.
Oh, yeah.
He used just 5 words.
5 words. What were they?
1,000 songs in your pocket.
Wow.
Concise, impactful, everyone got it.
That's a powerful reminder that less is often more.
You can say more with fewer words if you choose them carefully
Yeah.
and leverage the context of the situation.
And speaking of leveraging context, what about chunking
Oh, yeah. Chunking is a great technique.
that Abrahams mentions?
It's about breaking down information into smaller, more digestible pieces.
It gives your listener's brain a break.
Exactly. And it helps highlight those key takeaways,
That's really important.
especially if you're delivering a lot of information.
All right, so we've covered the 4 dimensions of focus: goal, relevance, accessibility, and concision. It's a lot to keep in mind. How do we do all this when we're speaking off the cuff?
It's a good question. It takes practice, just like all the techniques we've talked about. The more you consciously apply these principles in your daily conversations, the more natural they become.
It becomes part of your toolkit.
Exactly. And remember, it's a journey.
We don't have to master everything all at once.
Right. Choose a few that resonate with you.
Okay?
And practice those regularly. And be patient with yourself. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Just keep practicing.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground in terms of mindset and techniques, but let's get a little more practical. You know, Abrahams also dives into specific scenarios,
Right?
things that we encounter every day, like small talk
Uh-huh.
or toasts, even giving feedback,
Those can be tricky, too.
especially small talk, which he calls Abrahams the epitome of spontaneous speaking.
Oh, yeah.
Like those brief encounters, they can be really nerve-wracking.
They can be, especially when you're trying to make a good impression.
Totally. And it's so easy to get caught up in trying to sound witty or interesting.
Right.
You end up just feeling awkward and inauthentic.
Yeah, you're not yourself.
So what does he suggest?
One of his key insights for small talk is to shift the focus from yourself to the other person.
Oh, okay.
Instead of trying to impress them, be genuinely curious about them.
So ask questions.
Ask open-ended questions. Actually listen to their responses. Try to find those points of connection.
And remember that gem from Abraham's mother-in-law?
Oh, yeah.
Tell me more. Such a simple but powerful way to signal that you're interested.
And it keeps the conversation flowing.
Totally. It takes the pressure off of us to be the life of the party.
Exactly. But then there's the whole other challenge of exiting the conversation gracefully.
Oh, Guff, yeah.
That can be the most awkward part.
Totally. Like, how do you get out of there?
He suggests signaling your intention really clearly and respectfully.
Okay.
So no abrupt endings, no making excuses.
Okay.
But something like, it's been so great chatting with you. I need to grab another drink, but I really enjoyed hearing about your work.
That's nice.
You leave on a positive note.
And you avoid that awkward lingering.
Exactly. Okay, now what about toasts and tributes?
Oh, those are the worst.
They can be really nerve-wracking.
Because you're suddenly in the spotlight. And everyone's expecting you to say something meaningful.
and memorable.
I always blank. I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to say?
Abrahams offers a really helpful framework for crafting those impromptu speeches. It's called the WHAT framework.
Okay, what is that?
So it stands for why, how, anecdote, and think.
Okay, I'm following so far.
So why refers to the reason why everyone's gathered. What are you celebrating?
Okay.
Then how is about explaining your connection to the person or event that you're toasting.
Okay.
Next, anecdote is where you share a brief, engaging story that really highlights their qualities or accomplishments.
Okay.
And finally, thank is where you just express gratitude and offer well wishes.
That is such a simple structure and
Yeah.
so helpful. It hits all the right notes.
Exactly. You don't want to ramble on forever.
Nobody wants to hear that.
True.
All right, let's talk about feedback conversations. Those can be tough on both sides,
They
right?
can be. Whether you're giving the feedback or receiving it, it can feel a little confrontational.
So what's the key here?
Well, Abrahams encourages us to shift our mindset from judgment to collaboration.
Yeah, how do we do that?
So instead of seeing feedback as criticism, view it as an opportunity to learn and grow and improve together.
Oh, that's a good point. It takes the sting out of it.
Right. And it becomes more of a team effort.
I like that a lot.
Now, for delivering feedback effectively, he suggests using what he calls the 4 I's structure.
Okay, what is that?
It stands for information, impact, invitation, and implications.
I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
So first, information. This is where you provide specific, objective observations about the behavior or the situation you're addressing.
Okay.
Then impact is where you explain how that behavior impacts you, the team, or the project.
Okay.
Next comes invitation. This is a genuine invitation to collaborate on finding a solution.
Okay.
And finally, implications. This is where you outline the potential positive and negative consequences of addressing or not addressing the issue.
Okay, so you're basically laying out all the possibilities.
Exactly.
What happens if we do this? What happens if we don't do this?
It keeps the conversation really focused.
And it's less likely to get personal,
Right, because you're focusing on the behavior.
not attacking the person.
And it subtly shifts that dynamic to one of collaboration.
Okay.
Like 2 people working together to solve a problem.
I can see how that would make a huge difference in how the feedback is received. It feels
Absolutely.
much more supportive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And remember, even in these impromptu moments, a little preparation goes a long way.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
If you anticipate needing to give feedback, take a moment beforehand to really consider the context, your desired outcome, and how you want to frame that conversation.
Oh, that's good advice.
Yeah.
And be mindful of your tone.
Right.
Yes, tone is so
Like
important.
in nonverbal cues,
You want to convey support and a willingness to work together.
not negativity, not judgment,
It's all about framing the conversation in a way that encourages open communication.
and positive change. Exactly. Wow. We've covered so much today. From managing those this suck-ass moments to practical strategies, I feel like this deep dive has been incredibly insightful.
Me too. I'm feeling a lot more confident about tackling these impromptu speaking situations.
And remember, it's a skill.
We can all develop it with practice and the right mindset.
And if you want even more insights, I highly recommend checking out Matt Abraham's book, Think Faster, Talk Smarter.
And his podcast.
Yes, the podcast is fantastic too.
So much great information out there. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Keep practicing, and I promise you'll be amazed at how much more confident and effective you become.
It's all about taking those small steps and celebrating those little victories. You got this.